In the early 19th century, the Italian peninsula was nothing like the one we know today. It was in total disarray, being a mishmash of duchies, kingdoms, and foreign-controlled territories. The Holy Roman Empire had just dissolved in 1806, and the Napoleonic Wars had disrupted the Ancien regime, dismantling feudalist structures and introducing reform and secular governance in its place. That is, until Napoleon's defeat, where the 1815 Congress of Vienna restored Austrian dominance and reimposed those old monarchies that he sought to undermine. The feudal foundations that made up the political foundations of Italy were beginning to crumble, with no unified political vision rising up to take its place. In this period of uncertainty was born Giuseppe Mazzini in 1805, a man who would come up with influential ideas that challenged not only the political landscape of Italy, but also redefine its national identity. In 1831, Mazzini founded La Giovane Italia, or Young Italy, a revolutionary movement that he regarded as much more than an association pursuing limited political goals. Members of Young Italy were united not only by objectives, but by a commitment to a body of ideas, and by a belief in a law of progress and of duty. Mazzini's influence set off the fuse in shaping the ideological identity of Italian nationalism, but the fire that was set off was ultimately carried forward and kept alive by other, more pragmatic forces. Despite all the rousing claims and fervorous writings of Mazzini, historians are split on the true impact Mazzini had on Italian nationalism. While Mazzini's idealism laid the groundwork for the Risorgimento, his critics argue that his efforts lacked tangible results. His failed military insurrections have led some to view him as a visionary whose ideas often fell short in practice. While Mazzini envisioned Italy's unification, the actual realization of this vision depended on more practical forces. This disparity between Mazzini's idealism and the forces that ultimately brought about Italian unification forms a central theme of this documentary. We wish to explore this dynamic to find out how far ideas alone can help shape history. So who was Giuseppe Mazzini, and what turned him from a young student into the voice of a revolution? Born in Genoa in 1805 to a middle-class family, Mazzini was raised in a politically aware household. During his law studies at the University of Genoa, he was greatly influenced by Enlightenment and Romantic thinkers. He was noted to have fascinated interest in Vico, Condorcet, Rousseau, and Herder, a wide range of scholars who espoused ideas about liberalism, moral duty, and national cultural unity. These influences laid the foundations for his personal belief that nationalism should be both political and ethical. In the late 1820s, Mazzini joined the Carbonari, a secret society that championed greater personal liberty and independence from foreign rule, two ideas that deeply resonated with Mazzini. But after being imprisoned for his involvement, he grew disillusioned with the Carbonari's reliance on secrecy and ritual. Reflecting on the experience, Mazzini later said that the society gave not the slightest hint about the kind of state which the Carbonaria sought to attain, whether federalism or unity should be the goal, a republic or a monarchy. This disillusionment led Mazzini to rethink the role Italy played on both the national and European stage. He believed that Italian nationalism should not merely strive for betterment of the fate of a people who had been dismembered, oppressed, humiliated, but should instead embody a presentiment that Italy, rising, could be the initiator of a new life, and how Italy could possibly bring unity to the nations of Europe. This idea of Italy's unique mission within the context of Europe would later become an idea fixe in Mazzini's mind, inspiring him to create a new movement to replace the Carbonari. Thus, in 1831, Mazzini founded Young Italy, a revolutionary movement built upon the vision of a unified, free and republican nation. Unlike the Carbonari, Young Italy was not merely a secret society, but a fully formed ideological project with a clear mission. As Mazzini wrote in his Istruzione Generale per gli Affratellati nella Giovine Italia, the movement was much more than an association pursuing limited political goals, but rather a collective bound by a commitment to a body of ideas and fervent belief in a law of progress and of duty. To that end, Mazzini deliberately recruited students, artisans, and young patriots under the age of 40, under the belief that only the youth had the passion, idealism, and moral clarity necessary for national rebirth. This was in contrast with prior revolutionary organizations who shunned popular participation and failed to align their goals with the public. Young Italy sought to do better by making use of the vast resources of popular energy and enthusiasm of the common people. From the beginning, Mazzini had made adamant the ideological stance of Young Italy. They would be republican and unitary. He feared that federalism would fragment Italy and drag Italy back towards the Middle Ages. In its place, he suggested a centralized republic capable of fostering national unity, civic virtue, as well as Italy's broader mission in Europe. However, in spite of their clear mission and ideals, as well as their widespread appeal, Young Italy was not very successful at enacting change on the field. The many insurrections organized by Young Italy, such as the one in Savoy in 1833 and the one in the Papal States in 1834, were repeatedly suppressed. The failures of these movements led many to disregard Mazzini and view him as simply an idealist with naive political strategies. Despite these setbacks, the movement's significance lay not in their lack of military success, but in their ideological legacy. As Haddock notes, Young Italy managed to penetrate so deeply into the various sections of Italian society and provided a sense of direction to an otherwise disparate revolutionary movement. By tying nationalism with duty, youth, and ethical commitment, Mazzini redefined it as a mass movement with a moral foundation, one that would go on to inspire future generations of Italians, including figures such as Garibaldi. Even in the face of their military failures, Young Italy still succeeded in transforming nationalism from the isolated ambitions of elites into a unifying and enduring political force embraced by the masses. This lasting ideological impact shows that, despite his political setbacks, Mazzini was indispensable in shaping the ideals of Italian nationalism.
Mazzini advocates the need for equality between the people of different races and individuality, not just through the utility of an individual or one's self-interested intentions, but also through association with the people and the nation. He stresses on the people's duty to the nation and the need to cooperate with one another, from within families to those within the communities and beyond. But Mazzini advocates that such freedom is not complete when one is without a nation. He describes the Italian people without a state as bastards of humanity, and the meaninglessness in pursuit of emancipation when one has yet to conquer their own. He thus advocates prioritizing the pursuit of nationalism over other precedents, in which the realization of a country allows rights to be fully enjoyed and material conditions to be solved. Mazzini's theory of a nation through unity in equality, commonality, and under one's ownership resonated with the young Italians who were frustrated with the fragmentation and foreign-dominated states of theirs, with the inequality rampant for decades. It is here where unity and pursuit of nationalism resonates with the Italian people, one that practices equality within their community. Mazzini also advocates the unification of the Italian nations as one associated with the language of the people. Mazzini describes how a nation is one with a common tongue that God has given a distinct people. He stresses on the urgency of unification with people of language commonality in a framework of familial association, in which there is no peace and joy within a family where one of the members is not present. In this, he meant that such is the miserable state of a nation so long as a land speaking a common language is separated from the nation. In a more important point, Mazzini believes that a nation is far more than just a collective group of people with convenient laws holding them together, but rather one with free men of equality that are bonded through labor and hardship towards a common goal. It is here where Mazzini gave the direction of uniting the people through the common tongue, preaching on the embracement of their fellow countrymen as though one is in familial ties with them. With fragmentation and inequality of the Italian nations present, this commonality in hardship and spoken language allowed unity and Italian nationalism to resonate with the people. Mazzini also advocates for the use of liberal institutions to support and reinforce the ideals of nationalism, furthering the commitment of the people to their country. Within this, he states the three main pillars of a nation, that being votes, work, and education. Votes representing the people's political participation in the nation, work representing the labor that the collective people could work towards, and education to ensure that there exists a moral conscience in addition to the spread of nationalist ideologies. In regards to education, Mazzini believes that universal education is the best way to spread popular national sentiment through the nation, not for the purpose of control or security in a totalitarian sense, but to forge and maintain a collective national unity in the community. Mazzini emphasizes that without this universal education, the moral existence and conscience of national unity will be an issue in which it could be distorted or forgotten even. Institutional practices ensure the flow and integration of national ideals within the thoughts of the Italian people. It educates the youth on the established ideals that were to be spread across, keeping the fire of nationalism strong within the community and allowing it to grow as an urge among the youths for what they need to achieve. The need for representation as a community, the struggles and labor to achieve it, and to spread its ideals to the masses are the pillars that resonated with the Italian people. Mazzini advocates his nationalistic ideals with religion, more specifically through the Christian beliefs. He emphasizes on the importance of religion in holding together the old way of life with the emergence of nationalistic views and practices in the new nation. Mazzini criticizes the nationalism established by the French revolutionaries, where they advocated the disposal of the religion in practice alongside the old regime. Mazzini emphasizes on the need to hold onto religious ideas, arguing that they are needed the most in these situations rather than to be disposed of or alienated. He proclaims the pursuit of nationalism as one of a religious struggle, or as he described it, a holy war, a crusade, reasoning how human existence is proof of God's existence, and that human conscience will harbor the presence of God in times of happiness and sorrow. Additionally, there is a need to tie the old regime and the new order into a broader sense that a society cannot reinvent itself and dispose of its past. Mazzini emphasizes on reconciliation with the old, with religion playing an important role in it, believing it to be far more effective in ensuring the balance of society compared to the fabricated regulations and rituals enacted. It places true moral demands on the citizens and directs the passions of the people towards shared goodness. Mazzini's understanding of the effects of religion and revolutionary change as he observed through the French revolutions reinforced his ideas of tying the old religious practices already known to the people to the nationalistic ideals he intended on spreading. The resonation of nationalistic ideals by the Italian people was not just transitional from the old, but also in preservation of its important aspects through religion to guide the people in moral conduct and achievement in pursuit of nationalism.
Mazzini eventually staged an uprising with Young Italy in 1833 against Piedmont, but it was prematurely discovered and suppressed. He was sentenced to death and forced into exile again, where he found refuge in Britain. It is important to establish the role of the Kingdom of Piedmont-Sardinia, particularly that of Prime Minister Camillo Benso di Cavour in the discussion of Italian nationalism, as they were instrumental in the unification of Italy. Under King Charles Albert, Piedmont was a despotic monarchy that opposed both Mazzini and Garibaldi. In 1848, Garibaldi offered his service to him during the First War of Italian Independence, which King Charles denied. The throne was eventually passed on to his son, Victor Emmanuel II, who played a central role in the subsequent nationalist efforts. During this period, Cavour, the Prime Minister of Sardinia, invited Garibaldi to Piedmont in 1858. He also secretly negotiated an alliance with Napoleon III of France, securing support against Austria if they were to attack. Together, they would cooperate throughout the Second War of Italian Independence in 1859, and later, without the French, in the unification of the Kingdom of Two Sicilies during the Expedition of the Thousand in the 1860s. Mazzini spent this time in Britain as a political refugee in 1937. He stood more as a theoretician, founding a new form of anti-socialist republicanism rather than playing a politically or militarily active role. During this time, he honed his definition of nationalism and republicanism. His strong ideals eventually led to an attack on socialism, turning many socialists against him, especially Marxists. Though it would have been more prudent for his cause to attack revolutionary rivals, he also criticized the communists, saying they were worshippers of utility. They have no other morals than that of their interests, and that their religion is that of matter. This had drawn sharp criticism, especially from Marx and Engels. Due to his convictions, Mazzini faced increasing opposition from competing ideologies. He may have weakened his own movement by making enemies where he could have found allies, since the socialists also opposed despotism. Some might even argue that Mazzini spent too much time debating ideological nuances instead of gaining support for his cause. Britain was initially enraptured by the foreign and romantic ideals of Italian nationalism Mazzini had championed. He remained popular as long as he embodied that image, yet he stirred up controversy. However, we would like to argue that it is precisely his refusal to compromise that defined nationalism and his vision of a morally unified nation. To Mazzini, nationalism was a moral mission, not just a political tool. While some saw his refusal to compromise as politically short-sighted, it was his unwavering moral convictions that offered a coherent and emotionally resonant nationalism, rooted in duty, virtue, and collective purpose. Without such clarity and passion, Italian nationalist ideology may have gone the way of the British Chartists, who suffered from ideological fatigue and looked to figures like Mazzini for the fervour they needed. The question then arises, how did his debates and ideologies affect Italians while he was in Britain? Mazzini wrote countless letters to his agents all over Europe. His letters clearly had an effect on the Italians as he succeeded in turning some Italian radicals against socialism. Mazzini's influence in uniting Italian nationalists under one ideology was clear, despite his exile. Though he stirred controversy and the Roman Republic failed, his influence endured. His time in Britain was not a waste. It allowed him to refine and broadcast his powerful moral vision of Italian nationalism, something impossible in Italy as he was a wanted man. While his uncompromising stance alienated potential rivals, it gave Italian nationalism the clarity and emotional force it needed to mature. Thus, Mazzini's ideological struggles were not distractions, but a tool to bolster the fervour for nationalism amongst his fellow Italians. Thus, we argue that his influence remained pivotal to the Italian nationalism.
It is clear that Mazzini could talk the talk, but could he walk the walk? While Mazzini was ideologically able to unite Italians under a common cause, his ability to physically unify Italy's disparate regions is less certain. Italy was rife with uprisings, and Mazzini had attempted rebellions across Italy, like in 1849 in Rome, and earlier in Piedmont, Sardinia in 1833. However, all ultimately failed. How can one claim to have effectively advanced nationalism without a physical nation to show for it? Mazzini's purist approach would nevertheless prime the field for the more pragmatic and active approaches, like that of the shrewd Cavour and the valorous Garibaldi. We will focus on the most notable and arguably most legendary, Giuseppe Garibaldi. Garibaldi shared many of Mazzini's nationalist convictions, even joining Young Italy and fighting in rebellions until he was exiled to Brazil. He fought guerrilla rebellion wars there, as well as in Uruguay, where the iconic Italian Legion, the Red Shirts, and his legendary status began. It was clear Garibaldi had both the experience and the flair for rebellion warfare, and was eager to bring the fight back to Italy. Like Mazzini, Garibaldi was involved in the Risorgimento in Rome in 1848 and eventually the Roman Republic in 1849, where he fought bravely, further boosting his legendary status. While exiled, Garibaldi showed his practicality. He was willing to compromise for the greater good, as opposed to Mazzini, whose uncompromising position would alienate potential allies, ranging from religious leaders to moderate liberals. He feared that unification under a monarchy would betray the ideals he held dear. Garibaldi, on the other hand, was willing to hand over control of southern Italy to Victor Emmanuel II and fight for him. This move would ultimately accelerate the creation of a unified Italy in 1861, something Mazzini's tactics had failed to achieve. Furthermore, he actively gained favour with the British. For example, his letters to Edward Cowan in 1854, where he wrote, "Should England at any time in a just case need my arm, I am ready to unsheath in her defence. Be the interpreter of my gratitude to your good and generous countrymen." Britain would eventually play a role in funding and arming him with men in the unification of the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. He also recognized that abstract ideals alone, like that of Mazzini's, could not forge a nation. Nationalism often needs a unifying symbol of victory, something to foster a sense of shared identity and pride among its citizens. As such, Garibaldi would mobilize the people, not with philosophy, but with results. His leadership in armed campaigns gave the Italian people these shared stories of triumph, making the dream of a unified Italy feel tangible. The most prominent example was the Expedition of 1000 in 1860, where Garibaldi led a military campaign to overthrow the Bourbon kingdom of the Two Sicilies and permitted the union of southern Italy and Sicily with the north. Garibaldi had more popular appeal amongst the common people. His personal bravery and willingness to fight alongside ordinary soldiers gave him an authenticity that resonated deeply with the Italian people. He wasn't a distant intellectual like Mazzini, who catered mostly to the middle class, but one of them, someone who bled and sacrificed for their collective future. In this way, Garibaldi did more than win battles. He inspired a popular nationalism grounded in collective pride. For many Italians who had never read Mazzini's works or understood the politics of the Risorgimento, Garibaldi was Italy. His presence was integral in transforming nationalism from a niche intellectual movement into a mass nationwide phenomenon. Garibaldi was the embodiment of Italian nationalism in action, leading military campaigns that directly contributed to the unification of Italy, achieving this with the support of Victor Emmanuel II and Cavour. Unlike Mazzini, who played little role in military operations, Garibaldi had succeeded in making nationalism tangible rather than a distant ideal.
It is undeniable that Mazzini's revolutions failed time and time again. Even though the unification of Italy under the monarch Victor Emmanuel II was a bitter disappointment. How then could he have any effect on Italian nationalism if he achieved nothing but failure? The answer is his focus. Mazzini worked on the minds of men, driving the fervor of the Risorgimento. Even though his influence was less tangible, his ideas inspired radicals who put constant pressure to carry on his cause. Although Mazzini was against terrorism, the attack of Napoleon III by Orsini in 1858 ironically played a key role in turning him sympathies towards the Italians. Even so, Mazzini's powerful ideology still lacked the dimension of tangible effect. Without the military action of Garibaldi and the political plays of Cavour, the unity of Italy would be but a dream. Mazzini might have given nationalism its fire, but it took men of action to make it real. It would also be incomplete to discuss his legacy and effects on Italian nationalism without discussing his influence on his nationalist ideas in the wider world. We will be exploring this with the case of India and of Mussolini's Italy. Giuseppe Mazzini was a key figure, yet often misunderstood, to the Risorgimento in the 19th century. At the heart of Mazzini's philosophy is the belief that nationalism should be based on duty, unity, and moral purpose towards one's nation. He advocated for a nation built on shared values and responsibilities, a unified cultural identity, and a mission to serve humanity. This ideology of his not only helped the Italian unification, but fueled the ambitions of people yearning for self-rule and national identities in colonized regions of the world, especially India. Surendranath Banerjee and Aurobindo Ghosh were two such freedom activists from India who were inspired by Mazzini's ideas. His calls for unity and sacrifice matched India's spiritual and cultural traditions. His writings were translated to Indian languages and became the inspiration for the Indian generation then, who were keen to see India have its own identity through non-violent and ethical methods. Yet another instance of Mazzini's influence of India was seen in the formation of groups like Sanibani Sabha, which reflected how the success of the unification movement in Italy, despite all the struggles, was an example of what could and should be achieved in India. Many Indians looked at what happened in Italy as the key to fighting the oppression of the country through faith, courage, national pride, and unity. We must begin with fulfilling duties in order to achieve rights, said Giuseppe Mazzini in The Duties of Man. However, Mazzini's dream remained a dream. The fascist leaders twisted his vision and claimed to continue his legacy while preaching the opposite of what he wanted. They laid emphasis on the unity and duty but removed its moral and democratic seed. Mazzini wanted to educate and free the people, but Mussolini reshaped it to glorify violence. They used his ideals to promote racism, materialism, and authoritarianism. His vision was refashioned to suit their ideas and justify dictatorship. Mazzini wanted welfare of people and humanity, but Mazzini, of Mussolini's manipulation, he became the face of aggression and violence. Because the anti-liberal ideas were being spread by Mussolini under Mazzini's name, he started becoming associated with everything he stood against. He was persecuted and exiled through a long life in defense of liberty. In our day, his name gives authority to a system of government which denies liberty in the name of the nation, said C.R. Badger in a study in Italian nationalism. His nationalism movement slowly turned into a war. The true line of succession is from Mazzini to Mussolini, and the one interprets the other. Mazzini's story shows us both sides of nationalism. It can be used to bring people together and work for their welfare. At the same time, it can also be used as a weapon if it loses its moral core. His ideals helped the countries who were fighting for justice. The story of Italy's unification as one nation is primarily that of two very different men, Garibaldi and Mazzini, who shared the same dream and hunger yet approached it in completely different ways. What's fascinating is how much Garibaldi and Mazzini needed each other even when they disagreed. Giuseppe Mazzini was a philosopher who gave Italian nationalism its soul. His ideas didn't just stay in Italy, they spread throughout Europe and even colonial India, where they served as a source of inspiration for other independence movements. His narrative demonstrates that creating a nation requires both vision and action, values that are still relevant today in every struggle for freedom and unity. While he may not have charged into a battle like Garibaldi, his contributions were no less significant. Mazzini stirred the minds of Italians, laying the foundation upon which unification could be built.